Hello, hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Evelyn. All right, I see more folks are jumping on. All right, there we go. Okay. How's everybody doing? We may have a smaller group today. I know there's a lot of travel happening for a lot of people now, so that might be it. But in any case, happy to have everybody here. Hi, Sayed. Great to have you here. So today's topic is all about assessing your business strength and weaknesses, right? And if we think about our business, everything that has to do with us, you know, our employees, our product, our vendors, our investors, you know, and everything in between. There's a lot to assess. There's a lot to really take an objective, you know, step back and understand, okay, where in business are my strengths and where are the weaknesses? How do we go about, you know, continuing with things that are going well, and how do we fix things that are not? And so I think sometimes we're just so down in the weeds that we forget to really understand where the gaps are and what may be causing, you know, our business to stifle and not have so much progress as we want to. So with that said, hey, Rosalinda, great to have you. Hi. Michael.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Good. So as I mentioned, today's topic is all about strength and weaknesses. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you're someone who has done a lot of assessing with not only, you know, your business back in the day, but obviously with the entrepreneurs that we coach and consult with, right? is there any one thing that really jumps at you when you come into a business and you try to assess?
It's funny, Victoria. I thought you were going to say you have lots of strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, listen, I thought I'd leave that.
No, thank you, and welcome everybody. Nice to see familiar faces. I think the hardest thing for entrepreneurs in general is kind of what I like to say is knowing what it's supposed to look like. When you walk in a car dealership and you go buy a car, you kind of know that it's supposed to have, four tires and a steering wheel. And if you haven't been through the entrepreneurial journey before, you don't know what it's supposed to look like. You might be a chef, a consultant, a fashionista, a doctor, a technologist, and you have your craft, but you've never had the experience of running a business, and those are very different things. So I think, when it comes to this type of assessment of strengths and weaknesses, if we all knew these are the 20 things that we have to be able to do, am I good at them or not bad at them? And we know it's more than 20, then I think you could assess. But I think the biggest challenge, V, is that people, and me included, when I had my first venture, you have your experiences and you have your know-how, but you don't actually know what it's supposed to look like, right? And because you don't know what it's to look like, it's hard to assess what you're good at and what you're not good at, because you might be evaluating whether you're good at one thing that you're doing, but are those the right things that you actually should be doing? I think that's actually the most difficult challenge.
That's true. Yep. Very true.
So, I think that when you think about assessing the strengths and weaknesses of your businesses, there are obviously tools and techniques that people use to ultimately do this. But I always go back to kind of what I think of as the fundamentals, right? And some of those fundamentals are, and we talk about this pretty regularly because I think this is the root cause of some of the challenges. One is, do you have a financial plan? Right. One of the biggest weaknesses in businesses is people have an idea, they have effort, they have energy, and they just don't have a plan where they're kind of laying out, right? What it's going to look like. What is their revenue going to look like? What are their expenses going to look like? And if they don't have that, right, then it's really difficult to be able to try to figure out where you're going to go, right? I think that's number one. So I think that's one of the things that kind of jumps off the page is if you go in to try to assess an organization, do you have a financial plan? Do you have at least a year and maybe 3 years of this is where I'm trying to go? This is where I think my revenue is going to be. This is where I think my expenses are going to be, right? And then obviously all the important steps that go with that. I think that's number one. Number two, and I think I'm a little bit of a broken record on this. I think that your go-to-market strategy, your playground where nobody else is playing, is by far the biggest weakness that exists in early stage companies for a bunch of different reasons. Number one, we believe in our stuff. We see why our stuff is great, unique, awesome, right? But in the context of the world that's highly competitive, I don't think people spend nearly as much time trying to find their playground. And even when they have a service or a product that has value, right? They say, well, here's the 20 things about that product or service that makes it valuable. And what we tend to realize or fail to realize sometimes is that nobody's paying attention to all that. It's not even that we're competing with competitive products. If we had the ability to just line up a product or service against another product or service, and that was the exercise, then you'd actually be okay, because you could have the discussion of, is mine better or not better? It's the fact that we're fighting clutter. That's our biggest competitor. Quick story from somebody I just spoke to yesterday who has this amazing business where she's helping children with autism and developmental disabilities. And she rattled off to me the 27 things that they did. And I said to her, I was like, I hear you that this is special, but in the context of those 27 things, I would stop paying attention. Now, it turned out that her special sauce was that her class size was really small. She integrated autistic kids with normal kids as part of the effort. They did academic counseling. Like there were things about it that made her playground very unique. But in the context of all that, it got lost. So I think number one, financial plan. Number two, you're really thinking about how to find your playground. Because if you find your playground, then you stand out. And when you stand out, you make all other things work. I think the other thing that when you assess, an organization and where they are, how much have they, really thought about how the business makes money, right? And been deliberate about your, for lack of a better word, a business model. Okay, I think a lot of times people go and do, right? And they haven't really said, okay, how am I going to make money? There's a lot of people that generate a lot of volume around what they do, like let's say a social media following, but how does it actually translate into dollars? And then I think finally, I think that the understanding of what you're good at, what you're not good at as the leader, what you like to do and don't like to do, and how do you supplement yourself with the complementary resources that enable you to build on your strengths, but also, to my earlier comments, do the things that a business needs to do. If you're not good at finance or you hate finance, right, the business still needs finance, right? And so if you have a marketing driven person, they might go with marketing, right? But they haven't gotten the resources to say, I've got to do finance or whatever it is. And in the early stages of a company, you have to be really creative about where they'll get those resources, because you can't just write a check, right? You may have to go to a university or whatever it may be. And then lastly, we've talked about this, consistently, is setting priorities. You have scarce resources. You've got to execute well in early stages with those scarce resources. How do you make sure that when you wake up every day, you've got the priorities that are the most important ones, and that you're aligning the scarce resources of the organization to those priorities? If you go to an organization and an organization lacks any of those things, it is significantly less likely that organization will be successful. Like we always talk about how society talks about how entrepreneurship is just passion and grit and a good idea. And you have two companies that do exactly the same thing. And one is very, very successful and one is not successful at all. And it's because of how you do these and many of the other skills that you have to develop as an entrepreneur.
Yep. So these are great points. And obviously as entrepreneurs, as kind of leaders of the company, we can often probably, to a certain degree, see where the weaknesses in the business are. I think what becomes really hard, and I want us to get into that a little bit, is it's really hard to see what our personal weaknesses are. And I think being a good entrepreneur requires you, we talk about a little bit of, humility and ego, right? And obviously the success of your business depends on you. So how do you, objectively look at yourself? Because listen, if you're kind of set on certain ways, then those ways are not right for the business, or if, just the way that you manage or the way that you handle finances, right? To you might think that, I'm doing what I should be doing, but how do you objectively look at yourself and say, these are my weaknesses? What do I do to get better?
It's a really difficult question for me to answer, because I had no ego and had all the humility in the world when I started my healthcare business. So
right, and you're perfect.
It's hard for me to now. I was the complete opposite. I came from being a college athlete and then a mergers and acquisitions lawyer in a large New York law firm, which is, if not the most intense, probably the most intense environment. These are billion-dollar companies buying each other, and you're in your 20s, working 24 hours a day, just trying to survive. And it was just go. And, going into a venture, especially starting, the first business in the US to reward people for being healthy, you just had to have a healthy dose of ego. Now, I don't think I had a healthy dose of it, because in the balance V of what you described of ego and humility, it was probably 90% ego and 10% humility. Because, you know, you're, in our case, and in many cases of the people here, you're basically telling an industry, in this case, healthcare, that they were going to do something that they told us they would never do. And you're like, no, you're going to do it. Right. So you have to have the ego to see your vision. I mean, think about our iconic entrepreneurs, you know, Steve Jobs, Edward Lewis, who started, you know, Essence magazine back in the 70s when there was no such thing, you know, like you have to have ego to push it through. But, and it's a really important but, the way you describe it is exactly right. If you don't have the humility to understand that you have to learn and get better as a CEO, and you have to embrace, not resist, but embrace your jobs to make it work. And by making it work, you have to understand what not only you, but what your organization doesn't have. That's not a negative. It's a sign of really great leadership, right? And that humility is, okay, I don't know it. Think about, we've all been in situations where you're with somebody in a room and you have two different scenarios. One scenario is somebody, there's some criticism, or there's something that negative comes out, and the leader or the individual says, no, we got it. We just did it. You don't understand it, da, da, da. And there's all the noise that goes with that, right? And the personality challenge. And there's just somebody else that says, yeah, you're right. We do need that. We do need to do it better. How much easier is the second than the first, right? And when you're a leader, you need to have the ego to push your vision through. But you have to absolutely have the humility to understand, yeah, we have to learn, we have to get better, we have to grow, because, you know, this entrepreneurial venture is a series of all of these different skills that we talk about. And so, you know, V, when you talk about assessment and you're thinking about your business, and if you come in from the outside, like we often do, to larger companies and take a look at them, it is painfully obvious when the leadership lacks that combination of, you know, not just ego and humility, but other things, but definitely the humility to be able to understand that along this journey, you're going to have to learn and grow and make mistakes along the way, you know?
Right. Yeah, interesting. It's just, you know, like I said, we get so wrapped up in certain things, and I think a lot of times we just think the way we do it is the right way, right?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that goes with this assessment and this idea of, you know, what are these fundamental elements for, you know, a successful business is communication. And, you know, your job as the leader is to make everybody else understand it and get it and act on it, right? So that might be a customer, an investor, a partner, a co-founder, an advisor, an employee. And way too many times, because we've been through every single machination of what it takes to build the it, whatever the it is, whether it's a product or service, right? We tend to get really caught up in the fact that all of those underlying details matter, right? And the ability to communicate your vision in a way that is clear and concise and compelling is incredibly important to getting all of those constituents to act, right? So how do business advance? They advance because customers buy things, investors invest in you, right? Employees join you, advisors help you, and on and on and on. And the question is, well, why do these people do this? Well, in early stages, they do it because they're aligning to something that is compelling. Yeah. And too many times well, here's the analogy, right? You've heard me say this before. When you go buy a car and the salesperson says to you, I'd like to tell you about the car, you go, no, hold on a sec. I want to go in the passenger side and open up the glove compartment and read the driver's manual. Like, no one would ever sell a car, right? And I think a lot of times we feel that as the leaders, we have to explain and explain and explain and explain and explain, when actually it's the complete opposite. It's the ability in a very short period of time to communicate the value of the business. And that's a very counterintuitive thing to do. You go in, so when you go in and you assess, and I'd ask each of you to assess yourselves and go, well, do I write these 3-paragraph emails? Because you know what I'll tell you about the 3-paragraph emails? Nobody reads
them.
Right? And so are you clearly and concisely communicating to your constituents in a way that is compelling? And if it's compelling, people act. And if it's not compelling, people don't act. And if it's in the middle, they act less. Right? And so when you go into a business and the leader is going, you take a step back, and each of us should say to ourselves, am I able to clearly and concisely communicate to my constituents why you should pay attention to us? You know, I know, V, that when we started rewarding people for being healthy, we just said, you know, every other industry uses rewards to get you to do stuff. Healthcare, which has the most complicated stuff, like take care of your health, like that's the industry that should be using rewards the most.
Right.
And yes, was there a whole business behind that, a whole technology platform, but you know, all this stuff, of course. But if you go, yeah, then the receptiveness to everything else that's going to follow is just different. If you get excited about the car you want to buy or the house you want to buy, you'll look at the inspection for the house and go, yeah, we can fix the basement.
Right.
And it's a natural thing for us as entrepreneurs to explain every detail about how all the sausage is made.
Yeah.
Because we think that's how people understand it, and it's actually the complete opposite.
Right. No, great point. One of the things that I want to dig into, and I know this has come up in the past, you know, when we talk about, you know, weaknesses or gaps, is when it comes to sales for entrepreneurs, right? Because at the end of the day, entrepreneurs are always selling. And it, you know, oftentimes, you know, even with the kind of coaching and consulting that we do, we see that, you know, not having a standard sales process, you know, or sales materials really gets entrepreneurs into trouble, because it's reinventing the wheel every time. And they end up spending, you know, precious time and effort on things that should be kind of, you know, rolling off their shoulders in a way, just to have a standard process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it relates a lot to the clear and concise communication, right? Is when you go to talk to somebody about something, the ability to have the most important points that you want made regular and repeatable is incredibly important. So it's so worth the time to put together some standard sales materials, everything from a standard email to a standard, you know, sell sheet to what appears on your website. Because remember, customers aren't paying attention to all the details. You want them to get, right, what you're saying and get it quickly. And if you have to explain it every time, if you have to rewrite things every time, if you have to, like, it becomes difficult to stand out among the crowd. The ability to, you know, quickly and concisely get to, you know, what's the value of this to me as a potential buyer, whether it's a business or a consumer, is incredibly important. And I know a lot of times there's significant time and effort that needs to be taken to put this stuff in place. But once you have it, it's one of those things that really can ignite your success, because you've framed them in a way that position you the right way, and hopefully is clear and concise. You know, one example that we did back in my old company that took us a really long time to do, what was so incredibly valuable, is that our customers were big companies like health plans, like Aetna and Cigna and United Healthcare. And they used to, whenever they would go and buy a technology solution like ours, they put out an RFP. So for those of you who are, I know many of you are, but you know, RFPs are requests for proposal. They'll put out a big thing that says, here's what we're looking for. Can you please respond to these, you know, 8 million questions? And what we found was that two things. Number one, it took them forever to actually write these RFPs. And number two, you really could get lost in the shuffle of all that. And so what we did is we actually wrote a sample RFP for them. We gave them the 50 questions. We said, this is what we think you should be asking for. And so by doing that, and by having that standard, we could just say, here you go. It shortened the sales cycle, and we got to position it the way we wanted to position it. Right. And so part of sales materials is not just the work, right? Mm-hmm. Eliminating the work, like you said, B. It's the fact that you get to position it that highlights why, you're selling apples and everybody else is selling oranges.
Right.
And so those standard materials and also I would say standard process of what follows in that is really important.
So speaking of process and standard materials, I oftentimes find that especially early stage entrepreneurs who are really focused on generating revenue, every time, they have a potential lead or sale, they get in this habit of going down the rabbit hole of, everything that the customer asks for, customized, they're going to try to do. Can you talk a little bit about why that's not always a good idea?
Yeah, when you go into a company and you try to assess the likelihood of how their revenue flows, the ability for it to be a package is incredibly important. It's not even so much whether or not you're willing to play with the package. It's just that the goal is to simplify in a cluttered world, right? So there was I may get the name wrong. I think it's called Cold Stone Creamery, which was an ice cream shop that's franchised throughout the United States, very prevalent in the west of the United States. And their original model was that you could literally go up and you could pick any ingredient that you could put in basically your ice cream, right? And they would whip it up together and you'd have it. And what they found was that their sales were not doing that well. They were really struggling. And what they changed it to is they had, 20 packages, right? Vanilla ice cream with M&Ms and peanut, and that was a package, right? They created 20 packages. They also gave you the option to make your own, and that sold so much better, right? So the
packages sold better?
The packages sold so much better and so much quicker, right? Because again, we're fighting clutter, right? So another example is, I believe it was Toyota. One of the large companies did a study and said, when internet technologies were evolving, and they said, listen, which would you rather have? Would you rather just be able to go on the internet and literally create your car, right? Click, 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 click. I want these for the tires. I want these for you could just click it and it would give you a price. Or do you want to pick from 3 packages? The sport package, the ski package, whatever it was. And I think it was almost 80% of people said, I just want to pick packages.
And because it takes the decision-making out of it.
Right, but this is something that's a big expense fee, and it's something you're going to be right in your driveway every day, or you would think that people would be ready, willing, and able to just be able to, right?
Right, I would.
So we have to understand that we're fighting clutter, right? And so I wouldn't think of it in the context as whether I'm going to customize something or not customize something. To the extent you put something in front of a customer that's in a package and said, this is the package we sell, you might lose a couple along the way, but the consistency of that will mean that the ones that you don't lose, you have a much better chance of success. And what I would say is that, remember, that package has a lot of things behind it, right? It might have things that describe it. It might have a whole bunch of operational processes. It might have pricing things that happen. When you change that stuff every time, it becomes really, really hard to create a business that scales. If you're a consultant and you want to sell your package and I'm going to give it away, this is what we sell, it will make it incrementally better that you move things along more quickly than if you allowed people to just kind of make it up as they go, because they're not going to. Unless you just blow them away, they're not going to figure it out on their own. They want somebody to put something in front of them that says, I can pick from 1, 2, 3. I might negotiate, right? But it's very, very difficult with limited resources to be able to advance the sales cycle as much as you need to. I know, Victoria, one of the things that is a huge fallacy about businesses is that the sales cycle is what it is, right? That if you're selling to a large company, it's going to take this amount of time. And if you're selling to a small company, it's that amount of time. There's no question that it takes longer for large companies than small companies, but it is how compelling the value story is and how simplified and structured the sales process is that facilitates that.
Yeah.
Right? If it's confusing and unstructured and not packaged, and they might get it, even if it's compelling, but they don't know what they're supposed to buy. And when they leave and go back to their lives, which they're going to do an hour after your meeting, right? And come back 2 weeks later, right? Do they have the structured process in such a way that they go, okay, I understand now, I remind myself I can only buy it this way.
Yeah, I was just saying that if you, as an entrepreneur, right, who's trying to sell, if you're constantly customizing or coming up with packages, you're going to spend all your time trying to figure out pricing and everything that goes in there versus actually finding, customers to sell to, because, it takes a lot of effort and time each time. But if you have, 4 different packages, you can, A, B, C, or D.
And it actually makes it less likely you're going to win. You think it makes it more likely than you're going to win. It doesn't. It makes it less likely.
If you try to basically make every person happy with everything they want.
Yeah, because remember, you're supposed to be packaging up your stuff in a way that is compelling.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're like, you should definitely, this is how we do it. And they're like, well, what about changing it this, and this? Does it really seem that compelling?
Yeah.
Right. It seems like you're just kind of making it up. And that ultimately undermines your credibility. It's like, where this comes up a lot is in raising money.
Mm-hmm.
In raising money, you will go together and you say, okay, what's our plan? Our plan is to get to a certain size. Okay, to get to a certain size, we've got to raise $5 million or $5,000 or whatever it is. And then an investor will say, why aren't you raising $10 million? Or investor will say, why do you need $5 million? Why can't you do it with $1 million? Okay, so V, what's the correct answer to that?
Because that's what we planned for.
Right, that's the plan. So if the point is that if you go in and you say, we've spent all this time putting together in the plan, and because somebody in a meeting goes, well, what about 1 million? You go, oh yeah, we could do 1 million too. Do you really believe that the plan is the plan? Do you really believe that the leadership knows what they're doing? Do you really believe that the model or the business that you're going to give your money to is going to be successful with that type of leadership? The answer is, given where we're trying to get to, we believe that raising $5 million and the plan that is in your investment materials and then is in your investor deck and in your financial statements, financial projections rather, is our path forward. And if somebody says, well, we think you should raise $10 million, the answer is, well, we believe this is the right plan. Certainly with more money, we could accelerate this, but we're raising $5 million because we think this is the right plan given where we're trying to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive, right? You'd be like, oh, if somebody says, you should raise 10. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, cool. We'll raise 10. Right?
Right.
What about 4? Yeah, what else? Let's do. Like, it undermines your credibility as somebody's supposed to come to the table and say, this is what we are going to do.
Yeah.
Has anybody, and I know this is about assessing strengths and weaknesses, has anybody been in that situation where they've gone out and tried to raise money and somebody says, why don't you raise a different amount?
Don't be shy.
Well, in any event, if anybody does raise your hand, it's a common struggle. And I think that the what we're talking about before being in terms of assessing a business, are they making it simple and concise and compelling? And part of that is your product and how you package it, right? And part of that is if you're raising money, how you package it and say this is it.
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a reason why you, when software is released or a new iPhone is released, that you just don't get to pick what you want, right? Is that there's a lot of thought that goes into why is it packaged that way. In fact, in many cases, you may package it a certain way in anticipation of what's coming next, right? There are many rumors that the things that get left out of an iPhone that consumers complain about the next day is done on purpose because it's already planned for the next version, right? So the way that you package these things is a huge flaw for organizations because of the exact thing you said, is that like when you come in and you assess and you look at an organization that is just selling different things to different people all the time, you're like, how is that going to grow? How does that create consistency? How does that create, kind of a set of guardrails that let you go fast by just selling the same thing, over and over again?
Yeah.
The fact that you can do a million things doesn't mean you should do a million things.
Right. Easier said than done.
Of course.
Hey, for the few folks on the call, does anybody have any specific questions or, things that you've experienced or, anything that you want our help digging it into your strength or weakness?
Hi, this is Rosalinda.
Hi.
Hi. So listen to Michael. In terms of, for me, it wasn't just trying to acquire the money for the business. It's customers that ask me, why is my price not the same as Walmart price or, Walgreens prices? I'm a pharmacist and I have a small business and been there for 10 years. So I tell them, this is a small business, but my quality is different. Mm-hmm. It might be $2, $3 more than Walmart, but my qualities are totally different from theirs. So when they leave, I see them maybe later in a month or two. They say, oh yeah, the quality is different. I'm like, there you go. So sometimes they do compare you with the bigger people, with the big organizations. And that has been a struggle for me for a long time. In the beginning, I will always change the price based on that. But I never understood what I will, I didn't have the audacity to say, look, my product is better. I didn't have that. That was my weakness, believing in what I had. I didn't believe in myself. Then I was making money. I was selling the products, but my accounting wasn't balanced. And I'm like, I had to literally sit down and say, what is going on? I was charging so much less. And the products I was buying was much, much more expensive. So I said, no, it doesn't balance out. So when they come, they will ask you, why is it not like Walgreens price? I'm like, because this is Rose Pharmacy and it's a different quality. And I just stand on my word. I don't shift anymore. And, because I believe in what I have.
So here's what I would say, Rosalinda. So in your particular industry where there's the actual, drug, sometimes it's a very apples to apples comparison. It's a commodity, right? And I know that's not completely the same, it's not always the case. But let's assume for argument's sake that Walmart and you sold the exact same thing, right? And because Walmart's Walmart and because it pays less for the drug, they can sell it at the level that you're selling it at, but they can make money where you can't,
right?
Because you don't have the volume that they have. So then you need to say to yourself, in order for me to charge more for the same thing, what is it that I have to do differently? Let's assume we couldn't say what you said, which is our quality is better, right? Let's assume it was exactly the same drug. What you would have to do is would have to add value on top of the transaction in some way. Well, what does that mean? Well, maybe it means that as part of being a pharmacist, you're providing them personalized service. You're providing them consultation, right? You're providing them guidance, right? We give you, every single time you buy a drug, we'll give you a 15-minute consultation about everything about the drug. Now, I know, Rosalinda, what's probably going through your head is, wait a minute, I'm filling 8 million prescriptions. I don't have time to do that. But the point is that the job is to create value over and above. If you said, listen, when you go into a Walmart or anybody else like that, you don't get the personal service. You don't get an understanding of your health needs, right? They're just selling you a widget. And because of that, and because of the differences we provide, and you may have to provide that in a more prevalent way, right? That's why you pay more here.
Right. Actually, I do that. That was the difference because they'll come here. I do spend time with them, and they like to communicate. They like to talk. They like to come and converse with you, and I will spend time with them because I'm not that so busy. But at the same time, I'm done with it. I get the medications ready in a very quick time because I know them and I know they're coming. And once they get in, I get it ready for them. While they're there, we're talking about their health and disease state matters, and they will stand there for a long time trying to listen to you. So I realized that they enjoy the conversations, and I do spend that time. I don't rush them out. Their medications are done on time, and they say, "Oh, it's so fast here." I say, "Yes, that's the quality you receive." And some of them appreciate that.
Right, so I think, and going back to our point before, Rosalinda, about simplifying is you could say something like, do the people at Walmart know you? In fact, do you even go to the same Walmart every time? Right? You might go to 5 different Walmarts, right? Just to get your drug. So the difference is we know you, and the difference is we know the prescriptions you filled, and you can talk to us about it. If that's not worth $2 or $3, I don't know what is.
That's amazing. That's a good one.
Right. So that's the thing is we go back to Victoria, your question about simplifying, right? Is if somebody came up and said, why would I pay $3 more to you than I would to Walmart? And you're like, well, Walmart doesn't know you. You might go to a different Walmart every time. We know you. And if you talk to any one of our customers, we actually know about you, about the drug, and about how it's going to affect you. Not in a true, like Rosalinda, EMR sense or anything like that, knowing their whole history, but enough for them to be able to say, don't forget about this side effect, or, right, I see in your account, you bought another drug 6 months ago. This is how this is different from that, or this is how this could be, contradictions,
Right.
So.
Yes, that's true. I've been listening to both of you, and at first, like I said, I've been in business for 10 years. I realized that I had the tenacity, I had the perseverance because I believed in what I was doing, but I wasn't making money because the accounting was my problem. We have a governing or licensing body that they have certain things that you have to meet, licenses of all different sorts, and accounting is never one of them. So we go into the business and not having any background and income, balance sheets and income statement, those things are foreign to us. And then you're looking at there's money's coming in, expenses are going out. What is going, like, it doesn't balance out. So I had to take out time after several years of it was just, and you just don't want to look at it because it's something you have to deal with. But because you're oblivious, so you don't even know, pharmacy is totally different. We don't do numbers, we do drugs. So the fear of facing that, like, you just don't want to face your failure, and you have to own up to be humble enough to say, look, I need help. And I talked to Nita, and she was told me, how about what's it called? I think it's Intuit.
Intuit.
Yeah. So, and I've heard that so many times, but because I don't know what it is, and I just don't want to know what it is. She goes, go take a look, and it's nothing. It's nothing. You're already doing it, but it's much more productive and constructive. I'm like, huh. And it takes humility to say you don't know something, and you just have to say that to yourself. And it's been working out.
I like the way you said it. We don't do numbers, we do drugs. I don't know if that should be the marketing phrase, but it would make you stand out. Here's what I would say, Rosalinda. I'll push back as I have to always on us being leaders, right? We have to know the different elements of business that we need to have. We need to know what's in the car, right? And if we say to ourselves, well, I care about the tires, but I don't really care about the steering wheel, we don't succeed. We don't get to drive. So to your point, you say to yourself, okay, I know I need to have the financial part of this handled. I know it's not something that I either am good at or like. Cool. How do I go find a resource that can help me, right? That can supplement me to make sure that I'm running a business that is making money. And sometimes that resource has to be free. It's got to be like an MBA student from a college. And sometimes it's a fractional CFO or a finance person or a accounting person that can help you, a couple hours a week. But you have to recognize, and like you said, it goes with that humility. You have to recognize that if ultimately you're responsible for whether the business is successful or not, that means what does the car have to have? Great. And if I have a gap, which we all do, then how do I fill that gap? And sometimes how do I be creative about that gap? But think about what you just said.
Yeah.
You're doing an incredibly sophisticated thing, which is being a pharmacist, dealing with all drugs and patients. That's really, really, really sophisticated, right? And complex and ever changing. And you weren't able to have the right amount of attention on whether you make money or not.
Right.
And when you say it like that, and you talk about when we talk about the session about assessing strengths and weaknesses, like I started with financial plan for a reason, right? Because if you don't, you can do amazing stuff, right? There are so many people that run businesses that actually every time they sell something, they lose money, right? Because they when you say to them, well, when you sell, this banana, how much money do you make? And they don't know. Right. So I think that as long as you look at as part of the journey of being an entrepreneur and getting better at saying, great, I don't know this. I accept that. I know we need this. I accept that. How do I fix it? How do I solve for it? That's the journey.
Right. Thank you.
I think that, as we talk through these concepts, I hope that people can, go back to their businesses and think about their businesses in a way. This is not, I invent all this stuff tomorrow. I make all this stuff tomorrow. This is, and you guys, everybody knows this. There are many, many, many people, us included, that have been through this, that when you come in from the outside, right? It's just it's easy to see these things. It's like if you go to somebody else's Thanksgiving dinner, you're like, whoa, right? I know what's right about this and I know what's wrong about this, right? And but as Victoria, as you said, when you're in the middle of it, it becomes at times very, very difficult to identify, what these gaps are. And so it goes back to these fundamentals that are the foundations for successful businesses. And these are not things that you put in place day one and you go. Like you incrementally move to them, right? And improve in all of these different areas so that you have the opportunity to give yourself the best chance of success.
Yep, absolutely.
I think one of the other things that you see a lot in early stage ventures and companies is, there's scarce resources, and so the way in which those resources are organized really matters, right? So, it's this whole idea around process and metrics. Like, do you have processes in place to do things on a regular and consistent basis? Like, do you have the website meeting every Monday at 9:00, and every Monday you go into that meeting and you create consistency and everybody shows up every week knowing what they're doing and doing the same things? And I know when I say everybody, that everybody may just be you, but if you don't have process that organizes your resources, then you literally just feel like you're bouncing from thing to thing to thing. And in many cases, week to week and month to month, you feel like you're advancing, but you're just not advancing nearly as efficiently as you would like. And so implementing, when you see a lack of that in a company, in an early stage company, that's definitely a weakness, because you need that stuff to take advantage of the already, scarce resources that you have.
What kind of processes organize your business? What do you mean by that?
Rosalind, do you have a staff that works for you, or is it just you?
I have one. I used to have one, but I don't have anymore.
So I would think this might be, just giving you some random examples. So like in a trucking shipping company, every morning they have a 8 a.m. check-in, and at that check-in they go through the day's activities and whatever. And once a week they have a meeting about their drivers, and once a week they have a meeting about customers. It's these whatever the major areas are. Now, Rosalinda, in a bigger company, you have your management team meeting where all your team members come together and go through their goals and how they're doing. And then you have the leader would have a one-on-one in each area. They'd have a one-on-one in marketing and sales and finance and technology, right? And those processes are the mechanisms through which they manage. On a smaller scale, pick the most important things to your business, right? Hey, I'm making this up. We're going to review the order flow for the day, right? And we're going to go through this the same way every time, right? When you have that, you put a couple of regular, consistent meetings on the books. And even, we kind of half kid, but not so much, not really. Even if it's just you,
yeah,
right? Even if it's just you with you, like, okay, I want to work on marketing. Great. I'm going to do that every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Right. And, but definitely when you have, even if it's not a full slate of people, but definitely when you have scarce resources and maybe resources you're not paying that much, if anything, like advisors and interns and whatever, if you don't organize those processes to make it consistent, it's very, very hard to get the best out of those already scarce resources.
Okay. Thank you.
Got a couple minutes left. Anybody have any questions they'd like to float out?
Doesn't look like it. I think we've covered a good bunch here, and obviously very important information. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think also everybody, this stuff's not easy. Like I think sometimes we communicate like, yeah, just do this, this, and this. It's all there's all a lot of sausage making that goes with doing all these things, but don't think you can just go do, right? The world is too cluttered. It moves too fast. Just say, I have a thing I'm going to go do. You really need to have some of these fundamentals in place. And, when you have some of these fundamentals in place, it just gives you, it just significantly increases your chances of success. Entrepreneurship is definitely not something that happens to us, right? How much we succeed is directly related to how much we improve at these things, right? And to the extent that we don't have these things, or have some of them as much as we would like them, or to the degree we'd want them, it's harder. And if you're able to implement some of these things, then when other people come in and look at your business, when they assess these strengths and weaknesses, they're like, oh, they have a financial plan, great. They have a bunch of process, great. They have a clearly defined product or service, great, right? They've got a differentiated go-to-market strategy. They found their playground, great. Wow, these are all the elements for success. I want to buy from this business. I want to invest in this business. I want to work for this business, right? And the more of those you have, the more likely it is that you're going to be successful. And some of the comments here, we all realize that some of this is counterintuitive, right? Victoria, your point about, doing whatever for a customer, right? Is somewhat, counterintuitive. And it's learning these lessons and implementing these fundamentals that make your kind of business strong. There's a template that many of you are familiar with called the SWOT, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, in which a business basically says to itself, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? Places that our products or services could resonate, and what are our threats? What are the things that the outside world threatens us with, whether it's competition or industry changes? Or so, for example, Rosalind, in your business, as prescription drug prices have changed, that people have started to go to places like Walmart for pharmacies, that's a threat, right? And you say, okay, how do I combat that threat? Well, I'm combat that threat by not just selling widgets, by adding value when we interact with patients. So anyway, these are all things that give you a better chance of success. And I hope that, when we walk away today, we're given the you guys think about, am I implementing some of these things that make us stronger, that reduce some of our weaknesses, and all against the backdrop of having that right balance of ego and humility that allows you to put it in place in a way that can be effective.
Great. Thank you for that, Michael.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your day, and happy Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you, Victoria. Bye. Bye.